My stepkid said my opinion wasn't worth a meal. I left the family, along with the fridge, the bills, and the peace. They learned to cook with what was left. My name's David. I'm 49 years old. Sometimes I tell myself that's too young to feel this tired, but there's a kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with age. The kind that settles in your bones when you keep giving to people who never look back. I used to believe in patience. Not the lazy kind that waits for life to fix itself, but the deliberate kind. The kind that builds bridges plank by plank, even when the other side never lifts a hammer. I thought kindness could turn distance into family. After my divorce, I met Emily. She wasn't loud or bright like my ex-wife. Emily had a quietness that drew me in. Not peace, exactly, but the silence of someone who's already survived too much. Her voice was soft, her movements careful, as though every gesture was weighed for consequence. I saw her and thought, maybe this time it will be different. Maybe gentleness can build something that lasts. She had a son, 16, Noah. The first time I met him, he didn't look at me. Not really. He was polite enough to shake my hand, but his eyes slid past mine, already bored, already retreating into the safe little world he'd built without me. He didn't need to say anything. His silence spoke in full sentences. You're not him. You'll never be him. Emily told me to give him time, and I did. I came into their lives like a man walking across thin ice. Careful steps, measured words, afraid to crack what was left of their fragile peace. I tried not to take up space. I paid for dinners, fixed things around the house, replaced what was broken before anyone noticed. Every small act was an offering, an attempt to be seen not as a stranger, but as someone trying to belong. At first, I mistook tolerance for progress. A nod here, a short answer there, crumbs that I mistook for acceptance. I told myself this was how love grew. Slowly, quietly, like roots under frozen ground. But the older Noah got, the colder that ground became. He had his father's eyes. I'd seen them once, in an old photograph shoved in a drawer Emily forgot to hide. A younger man, smiling with that reckless confidence only youth and absence can produce. The kind of man who leaves damage but not apologies. I never asked Emily about him, but his ghost lived in that house. I felt it in every argument, every comparison that went unspoken but hung heavy in the air. Noah didn't hate me at first, that would have required energy, emotion. What he gave me was worse, indifference. The slow erosion of respect, drip by drip. If I reminded him to take the trash out, he'd stare through me, earbuds still in, until Emily repeated my words. If I asked him to come to dinner, he'd say he wasn't hungry, only to microwave leftovers an hour later. And Emily, she'd always sigh, a small surrender. He's just a teenager, David. Don't take it personally. But I did, because it was personal. Every day I worked overtime to keep that roof steady. Every bill had my name on it. Every broken hinge, every flickering bulb, every credit card statement that came in her name but was paid with my labor, that was me holding the house together. Still, when dinner came, I was the quiet one at the table. Emily and Noah spoke a language I couldn't translate. Old jokes, unfinished memories, stories from before I existed. When they laughed, it was like hearing a song from another room. I smiled when they did, pretending it was enough. There were good moments or what passed for them. I taught Noah to change the oil in his car, though he barely listened. We went fishing once, the three of us. He sat on the edge of the boat, phone in hand, while Emily tried to fill the silence with questions that went unanswered. I remember watching him that day, the way the light hit his hair, the calm of the water around us, and feeling the strange ache. Not anger, not even disappointment. Just the heavy knowing that no matter how much love I gave, I would always be standing outside a closed door. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake next to Emily, listening to her breathing, thinking about all the invisible work I'd done just to keep things running. The bills, the groceries, the quiet swallowing of pride. I told myself it would pay off someday. That one morning I'd wake up and find respect sitting at the breakfast table waiting for me. But instead, the air in that house began to shift. Noah's tone hardened. His words grew sharp, casual in their cruelty. "Why do you care?" he'd say when I asked about his grades. It's not like you're my dad. Always half a joke, half a warning. Emily would laugh nervously, tell him to be nice. But she never made him apologize. That's how it happens, not all at once, but in tiny, quiet surrenders. You let one disrespect slide, then another. You tell yourself you're being mature, that arguing would only make it worse. And before you realize it, you've taught them exactly how to treat you. One night, I came home from work to find a new gaming console in the living room. Expensive, shiny, something I knew Emily couldn't afford. I asked where it came from. Noah smirked, said his real dad sent it. Emily smiled softly, almost with relief. It's good he's reaching out again, she said. I didn't answer. I just stood there watching Noah play on the couch I'd bought, in the house I paid for, electricity humming because of me, and thought, so that's all it takes to be a father. One box in the mail. After that, things cracked faster. I'd wake up early on weekends to mow the lawn or fix the gutters, and I'd see him through the window, still asleep, sunlight spilling over the mess in his room. Emily would tell me to let him rest. He's had a hard week. I never asked from what. Some evenings, I'd find my dinner plate still in the oven, cold, forgotten. They'd eaten hours earlier. We didn't know when you'd be home, Emily would say, her tone gentle, guilt wrapped in habit. But I always told her it was fine, that I wasn't hungry anyway. The truth is, I had started to lose my appetite for that house, for that silence. I noticed how even the smallest things began to feel wrong. The way Noah slammed doors without consequence. The way Emily looked at me like I was overreacting when I asked for basic respect. Once, I found Noah's wet towel thrown over my briefcase. When I told him to be careful, he smirked and said, "Relax, it's just a towel. Just a towel. Just a phase. Just disrespect dressed as normal life." But disrespect, like rot, doesn't stop at the surface. It spreads through everything. Sometimes, after they went to bed, I'd walk through the dark house, touching the walls, the counters, the furniture, everything I had built or bought, everything I had tried to fill with meaning, and yet none of it felt like mine. I was the one keeping it alive, but I was already a stranger in it. The worst part wasn't the rejection. It was the slow understanding that Emily saw it too, and chose silence. Maybe she was afraid of losing him if she took my side. Maybe she just didn't have the strength to keep another man from leaving. But her silence said enough. I stopped trying to earn laughter. I stopped planning dinners. I stopped asking Noah how his day was. My patience, that endless bridge I'd been building alone, had started to creak. Looking back now, I can see how inevitable it all was. You can't build a home on the foundation of someone else's grief. You can't raise another man's son if the mother still keeps his ghost alive in her eyes. Still, I tried. God help me, I tried. Every night I went to bed thinking tomorrow would be the day things turned. That maybe Noah would thank me for something small. That maybe Emily would tell him to show respect without me having to ask. That maybe, finally, the house would feel like a home. But the warmth never came back. The laughter stayed thin. And the distance became a wall I could no longer pretend wasn't there. I told myself it was just a phase. It wasn't. It was the beginning of the end. There's a point when silence becomes cruelty. When you stop mistaking it for peace and finally recognize it as punishment. For months I'd been living inside that quiet, convincing myself it was normal. That the gaps in conversation, the cold dinners, the half-hearted thanks, were simply part of raising a teenager. I thought time would sand down the edges. I thought effort could melt indifference. But effort doesn't mean much when you're the only one making it. That night started like so many before it. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of Noah's video games bleeding through the thin wall between us, the clatter of dishes as Emily set the table. I'd worked a long shift and stopped at the store on the way home, buying groceries I knew no one would thank me for. The same routine repeated 100 times. When I came through the door, Emily barely looked up. "Dinner's almost ready," she said. Her tone was gentle but distant, like someone speaking to a neighbor, not a husband. Noah was already at the table, head down, phone glowing in his hands. I placed the grocery bags on the counter, feeling that familiar tug of loneliness. the kind that sits between people who used to talk. We ate in silence for a while, forks scraping, plates shifting, the sound of Noah's chewing louder than the conversation that didn't happen. Then Emily mentioned something casually, too casually. "Noah's been saving up for that new console," she said. "His birthday's next month. I think we might get it for him." I looked at her, then at him. He didn't look up. "What's wrong with the one he has?" I asked. My voice wasn't angry, just tired. "It's old," she said, cutting her food. "Slower now." I set my fork down. "Emily, we just spent a fortune fixing the car and paying the insurance. Maybe this isn't the right time to—" Noah interrupted without lifting his head. "We? You mean you?" It was the first thing he'd said all night. His tone was flat, but every syllable carried contempt. Emily glanced at him, a warning in her eyes. But he didn't stop. "You're the one who always complains about money. It's not your problem what we buy." I stared at him, trying to keep my voice steady. "You live in this house, Noah. You eat the food, use the lights, drive the car your mother and I pay for. That makes it my problem." He finally looked up, meeting my eyes with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Your opinion's not worth a meal." The words landed like a slap. Emily froze. Her fork hovered halfway to her mouth. Then, after a long pause, she set it down and said nothing. That silence was louder than his insult. She didn't defend me, didn't correct him, didn't even look at me, just stared at her plate as though she hadn't heard what her son had said. The air in that room thickened. My heartbeat was so loud I could hear it in my ears. I waited for her to speak, to say Noah, apologize, something, anything. But she just sat there, her face calm, her eyes downcast. And in that moment, I understood everything I'd refused to see for years. This wasn't my house anymore. I was a guest, tolerated, needed, but never respected. I finished my meal in silence. The food had turned to ash in my mouth. When I stood to clear my plate, Noah smirked, still staring at his phone. Emily pretended not to see. I washed the dishes, dried them, and placed them neatly on the rack. My hands were steady, but my chest burned. It wasn't rage. Rage passes. This was colder. A stillness that comes when you've finally run out of reasons to stay. After dinner, I sat on the porch. The night air was sharp, full of distant traffic and the faint smell of rain. I watched the house through the glass. The yellow light spilling across the kitchen floor, Emily rinsing dishes, Noah's shadow moving through the hallway. They looked like a family I used to belong to. When Emily joined me a few minutes later, she didn't say a word. She sat beside me, arms folded against the chill. We watched the dark street in front of us like strangers waiting for separate rides. I wanted her to say something, anything that would make me believe this could still be fixed. But she didn't. And that silence, her silence, became my answer. Later, while they slept, I walked through the house one last time. Every object I'd ever bought looked unfamiliar in the moonlight. The couch where we'd watched movies. The clock I'd hung myself. The framed photo of us at the lake. Smiles rehearsed for a happiness we never truly lived. I went into the kitchen. The fridge hummed softly, full of groceries I'd paid for. I opened it, stared at the rows of neatly stacked food, then unplugged it from the wall. The hum stopped. The silence that followed felt pure. I gathered my clothes, my documents, my watch from the nightstand. I didn't pack much, just what was mine. The rest, the furniture, the dishes, the years, belonged to them now. At the table, I left the keys. Next to them, I placed a note on torn paper. Let the house feed itself now. It wasn't a threat. It was the truth. Before leaving, I paid the last bills that had come that week. Electricity, internet, rent. One final act of closure. I didn't want them to starve, just to learn what it costs to live on the back of someone you dismiss. When I stepped outside, dawn was still an hour away. The air was cold, almost metallic, the kind of morning that feels like a clean slate. I walked to the car quietly, careful not to make noise. I didn't slam the door, didn't look back. As the engine turned, I thought about how strange it was to have given everything and to leave with nothing, not even anger, just clarity. Driving through the empty streets, I saw the city in shades I'd forgotten. The flicker of streetlights, the soft hum of early trucks, the faint glow of windows where other people's lives were beginning. I felt weightless and for a brief, terrifying second, free. Somewhere behind me, that house was waking up. Noah would open the fridge, find the dark. Emily would look for the keys, find the note. They'd understand slowly what it meant. Not revenge, not cruelty, just consequence. For years, I'd been the quiet provider, the man who fixed what was broken before anyone noticed. And when I asked for nothing, they mistook it for weakness. They thought love meant bottomless patience. They were wrong. Love has limits. Respect is the line. When I reached the highway, the sun was breaking through the clouds, pale light spreading across the asphalt. I rolled down the window. The wind was cold and clean. I didn't know where I was going yet, but for the first time in years, the direction didn't matter. I had done what I should have done long ago. I stopped paying for my own disappearance. Let the house feed itself now. Let them learn what it means to live without the man they refused to see. For the first few mornings after I left, I woke up expecting to hear them. The shuffle of Emily's slippers, the soft slam of Noah's door, the small domestic sounds that fill a house and convince you you're needed. But there was only silence. Silence and the steady hum of the world continuing without me. I rented a small apartment above an auto shop on the edge of town. The kind of place you live in when you're starting over or giving up. I still haven't decided which it was. The walls were thin, the paint uneven. Every time a truck idled beneath my window, the glass rattled like loose change. But it was mine. Every noise in that room belonged to me. Every dollar I spent was accounted for. The first week, they didn't call. I kept my phone close, though I told myself I wouldn't. I watched it like a gambler watches the last chip on the table. Not wanting to lose, but afraid to win. The silence stretched longer than I expected, and part of me almost admired it. Maybe they really could live without me. Maybe the bills would get paid, the groceries would appear, and life would keep its rhythm. But silence, like debt, always comes due. On the 8th day, my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. Just 2 words. We're out. Out of what? Money? Food? Patience? She didn't specify. She didn't say I miss you. Didn't say come home. Just we're out. I didn't answer. 2 days later, a picture came through. Noah, standing in front of the unplugged fridge. The door open, light dead, shelves empty. His face caught between anger and disbelief. Beneath it, a caption, "Hope you're happy." I stared at that photo for a long time. The irony, the carelessness. For years, I had filled that fridge until it hummed with life. Every bottle of milk, every carton of eggs, every meal they forgot to thank me for. All of it had come from me. And now, for the first time, it reflected the truth of our home. Cold, hollow, and empty. Was I happy? Yes. But not in the way they meant. It wasn't joy, it was relief. The kind that comes when the weight finally slides off your shoulders and hits the floor with a sound you can't unhear. Days passed. No more messages. Then I began to hear things, little fragments through the neighborhood grapevine. Emily had been seen at the grocery store counting bills carefully, putting items back when they added too much. Noah had taken a part-time job at the car wash, the same one I used to take my truck to on weekends. I imagined him there in the cold mornings, sleeves rolled up, water stinging his hands, earning in hours what I used to give in seconds. There was no satisfaction in it, just quiet understanding. Lessons come hard to those who've never paid their own dues. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the auto yard, I sat by my window with a cup of bitter coffee and thought about Emily, about the way she used to look at me, grateful, distant, tired. I wondered if she blamed me now, or if some small part of her finally saw what I'd been trying to show her. That comfort isn't free. I remembered the night we first met, how she told me she wanted peace. Not love, not adventure, peace. I thought I could give her that. I mistook her exhaustion for kindness, her silence for acceptance. But peace built on avoidance isn't peace at all. It's paralysis. A month passed before I saw her name again. Not on my phone, on an envelope slipped under my door. There was no return address, but I knew her handwriting. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. No greeting, no signature. Just a few lines written in the careful, uncertain pen of someone who isn't sure whether they deserve an answer. You were right. We didn't appreciate what we had. I thought you were just a wallet, but now I see you were home. I read it once, then again, then folded it and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. For a long while I just sat there, staring at the cracked plaster wall, the hum of the shop below fading into quiet. The words echoed in my head. You were home. Funny how they finally called me what I had always wanted to be, now that it was too late. I didn't write back. I didn't trust apologies born from hunger. Regret is easy when the fridge is empty. Gratitude is only real when the stomach is full and you still remember who fed you. Instead, I went for a drive, out past the edge of town, where the road bends along the fields and the telephone lines stretch toward nowhere. The sky was bruised purple, the air thick with the smell of cut grass. I parked by a field and sat there with the engine off, listening to the world move on without me. That was when I realized something that should have been obvious all along. It wasn't that they didn't love me. It was that they didn't know what love costs. Love isn't words. It's the power bill paid on time. It's groceries that never run out. It's oil changes and rent and a roof that doesn't leak. It's the invisible labor that no one claps for but everyone depends on. And when that labor stops, the world shifts. The silence gets heavy. The air gets colder. And suddenly, you remember the sound of a man's footsteps who used to come home every night. They were learning that now the hard way. A few weeks later, a neighbor from the old street recognized me at the gas station. She hesitated, then said, "I saw Emily the other day. She looked thinner." I nodded, thanked her, and paid for my fuel. There was nothing else to say. On the drive back, I thought about that thinner. It wasn't hunger, I knew. It was realization. The slow draining of illusion from a woman who'd built her peace on someone else's patience. I didn't hate her. I didn't even resent her anymore. I just understood her too late. We all learn the cost eventually. Some pay with money. Some pay with silence. Some pay with loss. I paid with years. She was paying now with absence. Sometimes, late at night, I imagine the house as it must be now. The dim kitchen light, the faint hum of a cheaper fridge, Noah counting crumpled bills in his palm, Emily standing by the window, wondering if I'll ever come back. I won't, because leaving wasn't the punishment, it was the mercy. When I shut that door, I didn't abandon them. I freed them from the illusion that love could exist without respect. And I freed myself from the lie that sacrifice alone could build a home. Now I live quietly. I pay my own bills. I eat what I can afford, sleep when I can, wake to my own rhythm. There's no laughter in these rooms, but there's also no contempt. And in that balance, that calm emptiness, I finally understand what peace feels like. They'll manage. They'll learn to live within the limits of their gratitude. And maybe one day, Noah will stand in his own kitchen, look at a half-empty fridge, and remember the man who once kept it full. Then, perhaps, he'll understand what I meant when I wrote that note. Let the house feed itself now. It has been 6 months since I walked away. Time moves differently when no one is waiting for you. Mornings come without purpose. Nights end without noise. The quiet is both punishment and mercy. I used to measure my worth by what I provided. Now I measure it by what I no longer owe. At first I thought freedom would feel lighter. It doesn't. It feels heavier in a different way, like carrying your own absence. I still catch myself looking at the passenger seat when I drive, expecting to see Emily's folded hands, Noah's scowl reflected in the rearview mirror. Habits of care are hard to k*ll. You can walk out of a house, but the reflex to provide follows you like a shadow that hasn't learned you've gone. I keep to a routine. Work, eat, sleep. On Sundays I take the truck out toward the hills, stop at the overlook where the city lies below like a map of my old mistakes. Sometimes I imagine the house down there, the cracked driveway, the porch light I installed, the window of Noah's room glowing late into the night. I picture them moving through those rooms without me, adapting, improvising, living. Word drifts back in fragments. The car wash kept Noah for 2 months. Then he found another job delivering food. Emily started taking bookkeeping work from home. They're surviving. That should comfort me, but it doesn't. Survival isn't growth. It's endurance. Still, maybe endurance was the lesson they needed. Maybe it was the only language they would ever understand. I think about the letter often, the one that said I was home. At first it felt like vindication, proof that walking away had meaning. But the longer I sat with it, the more I saw the truth beneath the apology. They hadn't written to reach me. They'd written to relieve themselves. Guilt wears many disguises, and confession is one of them. I never answered. Some doors, once closed, must remain that way or the whole structure collapses again. People ask if I regret it. Sometimes I do. Not the leaving itself, but the years before it, the way I let myself believe love could be earned by utility. I was a provider, not a partner. A foundation, not a person. Every gesture of generosity became a transaction I didn't know I was making, until the balance sheet of respect showed nothing on my side. The truth is simple. You can't buy belonging. You can't fund affection. You can give a child a home, but you can't make him call it yours. And when the love you offer becomes background noise, silence is the only reply that has meaning. One evening last week, I stopped by the lake where we once spent a summer afternoon. The same place Noah refused to fish, the same water that mirrored our distance. The dock boards had warped from rain. I sat there until dusk, listening to the slow lap of water against wood. In that stillness, I understood something I'd missed while living among them. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of truth. For years, I confused restraint with virtue. I thought turning the other cheek was strength. But patience, when it enables disrespect, is not kindness. It's complicity. I kept the peace by swallowing my pride, and in doing so, I taught them that my silence was endless. When I finally spoke by leaving, the sound was deafening. Now the silence belongs to them. Sometimes I dream of Noah as a man, older, worn, sitting across from his own son who rolls his eyes at him. I wonder if he'll hear my voice in that moment, the echo of a man he once dismissed. I wonder if he'll understand the cost of every light that stayed on, every meal that appeared, every quiet sacrifice that kept the walls standing. Maybe then he'll know that love and responsibility are not birthrights but choices, and that every choice has a bill attached. I don't wish him pain. I wish him recognition. That's harder and it lasts longer. As for Emily, I imagine she still moves through life carefully, the way she always did. She was never cruel, only afraid. Afraid to lose the boy she'd built her world around. Afraid to demand more of him. Afraid to confront what her silence allowed. I hope she's found some version of peace, even if it's built on the ruins of ours. I've learned to live smaller. A single plate in the sink. One chair by the window. I cook simple meals, eggs, bread, black coffee. There's a comfort in modest repetition. No one rolls their eyes when I burn the toast. No one mocks the music I play. The quiet is mine, and that ownership means more than company ever did. Sometimes, when the night settles heavy and the city hum fades, I still ask the question that has followed me from that dining table. Was I wrong? Was I wrong to walk away, to let the lesson unfold in hunger and consequence? To prove through absence what presence had failed to teach? There are nights I answer yes, that I should have stayed, kept paying, kept trying, kept pretending patience was love. Then I remember the look on Emily's face at that dinner, the silence that weighed more than Noah's words, and I know staying would have been the greater cruelty. It would have told them that respect was optional, that gratitude was negotiable. Love cannot survive as charity, and a man who keeps paying for contempt becomes complicit in his own erasure. So I let the question hang in the air, unanswered, because maybe there isn't a right answer. Maybe morality isn't about right or wrong, but about limits, about the line where endurance becomes self-betrayal. The night the letter arrived, I folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Still there, yellowing at the edges. Sometimes I take it out not to reread it, but to remind myself that I was seen, if only after I was gone. That, in the end, might be the only recognition some men ever get. And when the doubts come, when I start to wonder whether I mistook pride for principle, I picture that house again. The unplugged fridge, the empty shelves, the sound of realization settling into its walls. Then I whisper the words that ended it all, the ones I wrote with steady hands on that last morning. Let the house feed itself now, because love, without respect, consumes the giver until nothing remains. Because peace, without honesty, is only silence dressed as mercy. Because sometimes the only way to teach what your presence never could is to disappear. So tell me, if you had been me, would you have stayed? Or would you have left the keys on the table and walked away from a house that never called you home?